This is the question I want to ask this week that we can talk about. And we haven't talked a whole lot about this ourselves, but the game's now taking place in Aromas. It's been announced. And the question I have is, what is the, for lack of a better term, to kind of put this in sort of CrossFit terminology, what is the minimum work requirement in order for the games to pull off something that would be a good competition and worthwhile for the fans? Yeah. And I don't know. I have a couple things that I know that I think are sort of benchmarks that you got to hit in order to make it at least enjoyable for the fans. Yeah. And the first thing for me is that you got to find a way to get 20 men and 20 women. Like, you have to have it in person. You can pare that down from there, but I think that's got to be the initial group that shows up.
I think 20 men and 20 women at a minimum is what has to finish. Whether that's what they decide to start with, but I think that's what they have to finish too, because I think with all the adjustments that have been made already to basically pare down, I think you just need enough people in there to mix it up and actually have the discrepancy between finishes be like man-made rather than computer-made. It's like, oh yeah, we'll account for there only being 10 athletes by wider point spreads. That's manufactured parity in my opinion, versus actually letting more people on the floor finish between point A and point B to dictate finish order. So I think 20 people, like you said, is at least, like, for me, I would like to see 20 people finish. That way you have a final heat and an other heat, that people can battle to get in and out of throughout the weekend. And let me just say, because it brings up a key point that a lot of people, I've seen comments on YouTube and throughout social media, that just because the game says that they're focusing on holding the games at Aromas doesn't mean that's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of people are running off this assumption that like the games are happening in Aromas no matter what. And I'm hearing people call the games like morally bankrupt and morally and ethically bankrupt for pursuing this. And that's not the case. They're saying they're focused on making that the possibility if a live event does happen. And what they're not doing is immediately canceling, right? Because at least they're keeping their options open. They could still come, like, it does them no good to cancel right now when there still lies a potential possibility that they could hold an event.
Right.
They can still come to the same, like, no event conclusion that they would by announcing earlier, but at least they keep their options open now to further investigate things that could be beneficial going forward.
Right. And I think that's the thing. Like, if you view this through what's going on right now and you say, oh, under these conditions that they're going to try to hold a pretty robust live event, you would say, yeah, that might not be the best thing to do at this 5 minutes, but we don't know how things are going to change in the next couple of months. And then along those lines, if they were to bump it back to, say, September, obviously more time to kind of get a lay of the land, but then it also gives the sanction events more cushion to kind of figure things out. But viewing it through the conditions now, I would agree that, yeah, that might not be the best choice to have a bunch of people out to the ranch and do this event. I get that. But a couple months down the line, maybe things change a little bit. But I do agree with you that just because they say they're going to do it doesn't mean that it's ultimately going to wind up happening. But the reason I wanted to ask this question is because if it does wind up happening, I am of the belief that if you're gonna do this, make sure you do it and it's a good competition and it's worthwhile for the fans. Because if you're just going to whip something up and throw it out there, that is not going to be as exciting as some of the stuff we've seen in the past and is not going to live up to a base level of expectations. I actually think you might be better off just punting into 2021 and saying, we just don't have the conditions to do it this year.
Yeah. I it's funny. I was thinking about, I was visually walking, like visualization wise, walking the ranch property again and just thinking about what could be done. You know how like Rogue builds basically a field in Madison.
Yeah.
Within a matter of a few days, like a world-class stadium. I was trying to imagine, because there's certain areas of the ranch that, depending on what allowances they got from their neighbors in terms of like parking cars and moving stuff around, and if they even just resigned to shuttling people to certain places, that Rogue could maybe build a few things out there that.
Well, what's going to help is that they've already said there's going to be no spectators.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, to your point, they could definitely construct some things because you don't need to bring a bunch of bleachers.
There's a lot of property there.
Yeah.
But I think as far as like making it a good test, like meeting the minimum work requirement, I feel like outside of like the number of athletes, I like the number of tests for me is paramount.
Agreed.
And I think 9, I think, is about the minimum of where
now,
I would think.
Does that mean 9 that take place physically at the ranch?
At the ranch.
Okay, so you need at least 9, because that's kind of like the next thing I wanted to talk about is like, what if it's pretty clear that some of this is, whether it's just the age groups or even the teams, or that it's going to take place pretty much exclusively online. And maybe some of those early opportunities to qualify, those take place online as well. So if you had, 5 or let's say 3 online events that pared the field down to the 20 that you're going to bring, and then you had 6 events after that, that's
I would err on the side of having more in-person stuff, because I want to see people line up side by side. I want to see that interaction. I think you could, the reason why I said 9, because if you had, 4 online events or 5 online events to narrow down the field, and then you had 9 on site, then you're looking at 15 to 14 tests, which we've seen CrossFit Games hit that in the past. And I think that's a nice mixture. At 9 events, you could reasonably hold a 3-day event with 3 events a day.
Yeah.
And in that instance, you're testing enough amount of volume over the course of that weekend, as well as within each individual day, as far as like having to recover and, get through 3 tests, games level tests. Now, and when I say 9 tests, I mean like 9 times you're basically taking the floor, because you could get a 2-for-1 where it's like more scored events, but I think like 9 actual, like, let's line up, walk out, let's do this thing.
So if there was a scenario under which they had 3 qualifying events online, so you could pare the field down to, I don't even know if you want to go from whatever it's going to be, all the national champions, all the open qualifiers, all the sanctioned events, however many we end up having, all those qualifiers, if you can pare that down to 20 and 3 events, I mean, you might just take you do the 3 events online, you take your top 20 after that. There you go. I mean, there's a lot of film review and a lot of things that need to happen to make have that take place. But
man, that would be gnarly.
Well, and that's my other question is, what's the time frame that you need to make that happen? And I don't know.
I mean, the games team reasonably needs a week to execute some sort of online format, I think, to pare down the field. And really, I can see them doing 4 events, similar to like
4 online.
Yeah.
Like an online qualifier.
Yeah, like thing. The online qualifier.
I could too. Now, here's the other thing that I would do, and I would change this for the online qualifier if you're going to do that. I would lock the leaderboard until, I wouldn't let people submit. You could submit early, but it wouldn't show up.
Yeah.
Keep that all secret. Put your score in, so there's no gaming. You're going to do the workout. You're going to submit your scores, and then we're going to unveil it all at once. I mean,
that's so good. That's like, I mean, that puts a priority on like self pushing, right? Like, and I think that's the difference, right? Because you don't have other people to gauge off like you do in live competition. It's like your work, empty the tank.
Well, and 2, at the games, you don't get multiple tries. Now, you very well could do this multiple times. And then the other thought I had, I don't know how realistic this would be, but we talked about it just a second ago. It's like bringing people together via Zoom or some sort of online conferencing software where everyone would do the workout at the same time, and then you could have people watching that. But that, to me, that brings up another logistical nightmare of, you got to make sure everyone's doing the measurements and you confirm that everybody has the right equipment. And I don't know how you would make that happen. It was just an idea that popped into my head, and maybe that's an option to expedite the process, but I don't know if that makes things any easier.
Yeah.
As far as like judging and stuff like that.
There's so many and this is me, I hate being that person, is like, there's so many loopholes potentially in that, like who's to say your feed cuts out and you cut back?
That's exactly
5,
what I'm
6,
saying. Right.
7 feed cuts out 28. The old rep shaver.
But yeah, I think minimum. So if we're going to stick with the whole theme of minimum work requirements, I think you have to have 3 to 5 online events that act as a qualifier or the first events of the games to pare things down. And then to your point, you can go to the ranch and you can have the remaining 7 to 9 and then and then 12 total. I think is a number where people would look at and be like, yeah, that's a good test.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Man, it's just crazy that that's the status right now, that we're like, feels like we're trying to.
Well, and I think that's also an argument if you're going to do that, to why you'd want to push it back into September. And no one's talked about that. That's not an idea that's out there. It's just, to me, it just makes sense. It buys you more time to figure out what's going on with all the restrictions. International travel could be opened up by then. So that way, that's the other thing I think too, from a minimum work required standpoint, you got to get more than just people from North America, from the United States. So you got to have the right people there.
Workout one, get in the country.
Yeah, that's
outrun the federales. Hey, trust me, I know you can do it.
But yeah, that's another thing that they have to consider. I mean, I think if they pushed it back, they buy sanctioned events more time. They allow for a better idea of what's going on. There's a bigger chance that international travel is now open, and then they can start the online events, I don't know, late July, and then you have a whole month, and then you have the live competition sometime in September.
Yeah, it's tough though, because I mean, even mine's in July, and they post one. They haven't canceled yet, and I think that's telling. I think a lot of these events are holding off on canceling because they're waiting till they get closer to the event, and it's logistically impossible. I think Jacob Hepner brought a good point, like where the hierarchy in place forces them to cancel rather than them coming out and canceling, because I think there's money involved there. Although I would hope that most of them have a force majeure clause in their contract or whatever. But I think some of them are still trying to recoup losses before they outright cancel, because they're trying to figure out how can we make this work. It's like lunchtime negotiations in elementary school with your treats. It's like, I got this Twinkie, but I'm gonna trade it for your sandwich and your fruit cup.
Why would you trade a Twinkie for a sandwich and a fruit cup?
Volume.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a volume eater. you can tell, right? I was like, give me, it's like, I'll take your chips. I'll take everything. I'll give you this Twinkie.
I see. All right. So that makes sense. I would have made that. If you were trying to trade me that, I probably would have done that because I like junk food.
That's true.
Never thought about that from the volume standpoint.
Yeah. Wow. Calories in, calories out.
So as far as what are some other things that we think that needs to happen from a minimum work requirement, we need 20 men, 20 women, 3 days. I think minimum 3 days.
Yeah.
I think that's a good number. 12 events in total, not necessarily all at the ranch. I would like to see at least 12 in total, with maybe 7 to 8 in there at the minimum, minimum at the ranch. And you got to have, then, I mean, you have to live stream it. And I know they're planning. I shouldn't say I know. I'm confident that they're going to do that.
Yeah. And honestly, I think who is able to show up matters.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the big part too. And that's where, if you don't, if you qualify, let's say you do the 20 people and 7 of them can't make it into the country because of travel restrictions. At that point, then you got to have, I guess there's a backfill scenario, but then it's like, do you have the right, you don't have the right people there, because you're now backfilling to the games for people who, weren't going to make it in the first place, at least into the final 20.
Yeah.
And does that now affect people's desire to want to watch the competition?
Yeah. I mean, just take a look at the women. The women's side typically is more international, but will benefit from the fact that, you look at the top, Tia Toomey from Australia, but is already here in the country. Holta, unfortunately, would probably be in a tough spot. Jamie Green, other podium finisher, in a tough spot. Katrin, already in the United States. Carrie Pierce, Haley Adams, Amanda Barnhart, Bethany Shadburn, Danielle Brandon, all here. Turi Helgadottir hasn't earned her invite yet, I don't think so. But other than that, Carolyn Prevost, Canada, Alessandra Bocelli, she's here. Laura Horvath would be unfortunately out. Sam Briggs in the UK, depending on if she's here. She was visiting in the States and basically got stuck here. Sarah in Iceland. I mean, there's some decent athletes that will get left out internationally as a result on the women's side. And you look on the men too. I think it would be safe by I think it would be reasonable to assume that Canada would be one of the safe countries that we would open our borders up
Yeah,
to
because
first.
as of now, it's closed.
Yes.
Right.
So that's why I'm not necessarily including the Canadians in like the athletes that are potentially on the bubble. Because I just have a feeling, it's not based on any fact, but if come August or September we're starting to open up travel restrictions, America's hat will be the first country we let back in. Sorry, guys. I couldn't resist. But I'm trying to look. My computer is being really slow. But I mean, Fraser, Olsen, right off the bat, United States. BKG, Iceland might be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
James Newberry doesn't have a spot yet.
Right.
But I mean, I think Brent Fikowski, a lot of the big names, Cole Sager, a lot of those big names are from the U.S. So it's
right. No, I mean, I think it's the balance there. But if you get to the point where you just can't bring the right people and you're backfilling way down, whatever, let's say 1 through 20 are going to go, and now all of a sudden you're reaching into 30, possibly beyond that, is that the competition that you want to watch, or do you put it at this point? Are you putting a giant asterisk by it? It's going to be, there'll be an asterisk by it just by the fact that it's going to be different this year. I get that, but I think you can still minimize that asterisk, so to speak, with the athletes that you get physically to the competition. But if you're backfilling a ton, I don't know if that, I don't know. I think delegitimizes is too strong of a word.
Yeah.
But I think from a fan standpoint, we're like, well, wait a minute. This really, you're just doing an event to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the one thing that you can't have is anyone calling to question the legitimacy of the claim of the fittest. Because that's what, like, even going back to CrossFit's tweet, it says the fittest will be crowned. Now, if the competition isn't robust enough to actually support the claim of fittest, regardless of who it is,
right?
It's like, it goes back to like, if the games were only one event, Matt Fraser won that event, everyone would be like, oh yeah, the right guy won.
Yeah. But
the test doesn't support the claim fittest, right?
Mm-hmm.
The person does. And then that's the thing. The person shouldn't be the one. It should be in most instances, it should be the test that sets up the person versus the other way around. Instead of, someone like Fraser, who is otherworldly good, bailing out the test. And that is always the primary goal of the games. And if that is undermined, then why even have it?
Well, yeah, and so I think that's why we're talking, kind of minimum work requirements, because at some point you got to look at it and say it's just not worth doing this year.
Yeah.
But I think with the things that we talked about, if you can hit all those markers, I think people will be really happy and really excited to watch that competition.
Yeah,
because you're going to get 20 of the top women, 20 of the top men. Maybe not the names that you would expect, but you're going to, out of that many, I'm guessing you're going to have a really fun field to watch. Might be some surprises in there, and that's totally fine out of the qualifier. But that would, I think, give the fans an event that they would really dig watching and be excited to watch. And I think it would minimize we're going to put a big asterisk by this because, so-and-so couldn't make it. And, these people are out and they didn't have a chance, that type of thing. So yeah, 20 men, 20 women, let's call it 12 events with maybe 7, 8 in person, and you get the right people. I say minimum work requirement met.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. And a chance for everybody to watch. I think everybody could be happy. And I think it could be pretty cool. Because you've been to the ranch more than anybody I know. I mean, you can do some really cool stuff there with a smaller field of athletes. Because, I'd like to talk about 2016 when they had 80 people there. And those events were pretty good too. Like the ranch mini chipper, the deadlift ladder was good. The trail run was hard to follow, but we were able to provide some highlights for that. But there are some really cool things that you can do on that property.
I mean, you can set up some really cool, that property is massive. And I think what people see in video and stuff is just the beginning, right? At the top of that hill, like where, and I've always wanted to see this, is at the top of the hill where Dave's shooting range is, there's a rig there. So you can combine, it doesn't just have to be a trail run. It can be a trail run with a bunch of other stuff. It can almost be like this, I don't know, that's kind of like hybrid trail run, obstacle course, like, you know, call it the ranch gauntlet or something like that. There is a ton of stuff. And they have all the equipment in the world. And
yeah. I mean, they have enough that if you ran 2 heats of 10, you're good.
Easy.
Like you could, that's absolutely doable.
Easy.
Would you be okay if they just took 10 to the ranch? Same process as far as qualification goes. Pare the field down online. So now let's say you do.
I would want more events on the front end.
Okay.
So I would want more. I wouldn't necessarily just write it off right away, but I would want more events on the front end to filter down. Because to go from what 120, 130 athletes down to 10, I wasn't happy with how they did it at the games in just 6 events. So I would like a broader, more diverse test in order to get to that point. It would depend on what they chose to filter. Yeah. And I would say I would be cautious in being happy about it until I saw the full scope. I would reserve entire judgment until I saw how the rest of the games at the ranch played out as well. Because it's tough.
I'm just thinking from, and maybe I'm thinking too much from this perspective, but I'm just thinking from a fan's perspective and what they want to see. You know, we haven't had it. It's very likely that we will not have had an online like live competition other than the Rogue Invitational, which is different. It's not everybody in the same spot. That, you know, where people are watching athletes on the same field. And I think from the fan standpoint, I think it would be best for them to get 20 men and 20 women in person. I think that's something they would really enjoy. Would they watch 10? Yeah, I think they would, but I think people would be super excited for 20.
Yeah. Because then you also have that natural threshold of the final heat as like something that people can be jockeying for constantly. Like I've always liked that. I've always thought it was a good natural way of putting a carrot out there for athletes to chase. But
well, to be continued.
Whew, man.
We know that they're hoping to have it at the ranch, and we'll wait and see what happens.